World of Warcraft has seen some very dark times. Content droughts, design fiascos, scandals, systems too complex for their own good, and radio silence as community engagement hits an all-time low. And now Final Fantasy XIV and other competitors are closing in. But I don't think this has to be the end of the story for World of Warcraft. What World of Warcraft needs is simpler systems, more content, better community engagement so that the dev teams know what will get players excited to pick up World of Warcraft again. To that end, I have invented a system of my own, a simple system that gives players huge amounts of customization, that lets developers add awesome and useful abilities without fear of spellbar bloat, giving players the ability to upgrade 3 of their spells to be something new. I'm cooking up concepts for 7 of these upgrade spells for every spec. Some of them are returning favorites, some of them are brand new. Either way, Blizzard has my express permission to use every concept I post about in these videos in the comments or on the forums. And if the Blizzard developers are too pressed for time to engage with the community, then I will. I'll get the feedback on this concept, and even if they don't take a single one of my ideas, they'll know what the players want, and most importantly, why. And they can use that to make the game better, because I want this game better. I want WoW to last another decade. Now, when I was starting on putting together these upgrade proposals, I actually did Warriors 3rd. And then after I'd assembled all 12, I thought, I forgot to check the PvP talents to see if any of those break or get in the way of any of these upgrades. I should go through these upgrades again and see if there are any problems. Well, when I went through the Warrior upgrades in my first iteration, and let it be stated there will be more of those, okay, the fact that I feel the need to state there will be more iterations is a dead giveaway to what I'm going to say next. This first iteration kinda sucks, and I definitely need help from experienced Warrior players to improve it. I suppose I shouldn't be that disappointed that my first draft is lackluster. I've heard that Ernest Hemingway said that every first draft is, but I heard it from a comedian working a googly-eyed puppet, so maybe I shouldn't be considering him a useful source of information. But, one silver lining, the PvP talents weren't a problem. No, the problem is something else. It's the fact that I picked a lot of the wrong abilities to upgrade or the wrong ways to upgrade the ones that were the right picks. But figuring out the right way to fix it all, that's something that I should get help with. So without further ado, let's jump into the upgrades I picked for arms in Iteration 1 so you can help me unfail in Iteration 2. First we have Heroic Strike, which is an upgrade to Slam. It adds damage to your next auto attack. This is meant to be filler, just like Slam is. It costs very little rage and is on the global cooldown. The second upgrade is Roundhouse, a kick that is an upgrade to Shield Slam. It consumes bleed effects, taking the damage they would do and dealing it instantly. The third upgrade is Gag Order, an upgrade to Pummel that is ranged. The fourth is Cross Slash, which is an upgrade to Mortal Strike. It does not reduce healing received by the target, but it deals a little bit more damage than Mortal Strike would deal. The fifth one is Slicing Throw, which is an upgrade to Heroic Throw that applies deep wounds, has no cooldown, but it does have a dead zone. The sixth upgrade is Ankle Slice, which is an upgrade to Hamstring. It roots the target instead of slowing the target. Finally, we have Ferocious Leap, which is an upgrade to Heroic Leap. First, you hurl your weapon, and then you follow your weapon, dealing a 1-2 punch of area damage. It has no dead zone, and auto attacks have a chance to reset its somewhat long cooldown. Now for the thinking. Heroic Strike was a pretty cool thing, a classic warrior ability in every sense of the term. It's had different roles at different times. At one point, it and Cleave were both off the global cooldown and were deliberately set up to be inefficient rage spenders you can sneak in alongside your rotation instead of as part of your rotation. They were meant to be things to spend rage on if you have too much rage to use in any other way, with occasional procs or effects that could make them more efficient. But here, I'm treating Heroic Strike as a filler ability. Slam often functions as filler, and this is meant to be another possibility of filler. As for Roundhouse, Oh boy, that's actually an idea from much, much earlier. Back in the Burning Crusade and Wrath of the Lich King, when they were adding new tiers of abilities to the talent trees, Roundhouse was a warrior idea that I had that was to Bleeds what Conflagrate was at the time to Immolate, an ability that consumes the damage over time and deals an extra punch of damage. I guess it's only good for short fights where deep wounds or rend won't have much chance to deal damage. I so hope it's not overpowered in PvP because honestly, the kick animation is badly underused. I made it an upgrade for Shield Slam because Shield Slam is an unusable ability for arms for all practical purposes. I suppose that if I wanted to stick with Shield Slam's flavor, I should have made it a punch you deal with your left hand, maybe uppercut or left hook or something, but I really think the kick animation's underused, so unless I get feedback telling me to change it, I'm keeping it as Roundhouse. Though I do wonder whether there are things I could do with Roundhouse to make the arms rotation more dynamic or exciting. I mean, there are a few abilities in that rotation. Adding another one ought to be a good idea, at least on paper. Do I make this a cooldown that bleeds have a chance to refresh instead of an ability that consumes bleeds? Do I make this a bleed extender? Do I make it something that produces rage rather than spending it, since almost every ability in arms costs rage? Or do I make it into something that doesn't interact with bleeds or rage at all and simply functions as a filler ability that's on a cooldown? Feedback and ideas would be much appreciated here. Gag Order was an old school talent that made abilities like Pummel, Shield Bash, and Heroic Throw so that they silenced the target. I figure making Pummel ranged has its advantages from time to time, so I threw it in there. Mortal Strike is another staple for arms, now more than ever since it causes the deep wounds bleed effect. I figure that sacrificing the anti-heal debuff for more damage is a logical trade-off. It's probably a must-have for PvE, though I figure that must-haves are okay as long as there are only one or two of them in a given situation, since the system allows you to swap out upgrades anytime you're out of combat. Slicing Throw, well, I had two things in mind with that. Number one, I hate it when a spec doesn't have a ranged damage ability with no cooldown. I guess that's because I missed it out so much as a Holy Paladin, but that's why I removed the cooldown. It's admittedly a pet peeve of mine. And number two, I figure adding abilities that'll apply deep wounds without adding things to the rotation is a fine enough idea. Heroic Throw isn't part of the rotation since it has a dead zone. As for Ankle Slice, well, let's face it, I began running out of ideas here. There were a lot of abilities in arms rotation that I could not upgrade because talents were already replacing them. When I find myself running out of ideas, I tend to look for cooldowns or utility abilities that I can upgrade. I saw Hamstring and thought, hey, I can upgrade this to a root instead of a snare. Now for Ferocious Leap. Again, I was running out of ideas, but then I realized throwing your weapon and then jumping after it would look cool, and adding abilities that look cool is one of the main purposes of the upgrade system, so I upgraded Heroic Leap. I added that extra thing that says that auto attacks can activate this ability so that arms would have a little more excitement in the rotation. The player can slam down on their own current melee target. Twice. Once with the weapon and once with your own character's body. But looking at this, I've only upgraded two abilities that are part of Arms Warrior's normal rotation. I couldn't upgrade Bladestorm because of the Ravager talent. I couldn't upgrade Overpower because of the Dreadnought talent. I couldn't upgrade Colossus Smash because of the Warbreaker talent. Plus, if you don't count talents, there actually aren't that many abilities in the arms rotation. So maybe it's okay that I only have upgrades for two abilities? Heck, Slicing Throw might be a nice opener if you're closing a gap on an enemy. I guess none of the individual upgrades are bad in and of themselves, but the fact that all 7 of them taken together affect so few abilities in the rotation, it's just rubbing me the wrong way. Maybe I should have created a ranged upgrade for Execute, maybe call it Beheading Throw or something. If I should have, please let me know which one of these I should take out to replace it. I aim to create 7 upgrade abilities per spec, so if I need to add one, I need to remove one too. I was tempted to create an upgrade to Whirlwind that applies deep wounds, but first of all, Cleave is a thing. Secondly, I figured slicing throw meant I had enough things that apply deep wounds already. I could replace slicing throw and then have an upgrade to whirlwind called Blood Nova or Bloodbath, and yes, I totally stole those names from existing warrior icons. But, cleave is a talent that already applies deep wounds to multiple targets, so maybe that's not the best way to upgrade whirlwind. Maybe if Bloodbath applied a bleed other than deep wounds and dealt more damage, but over a longer duration? I don't know. Please let me know what you think of these secondary ideas. Now, when I started out with these upgrade concepts, I went ability by ability, not purpose by purpose, if you see what I mean. I asked myself, which abilities exist in this specs kit that I can give an upgrade to? And when I created upgrades based on which abilities I could upgrade, I often aimed for something that I thought looked or sounded cool. Almost always I wanted the upgraded ability to feel at least a little bit different from the original. Often I tried to create some kind of trade-off, making the upgrade situationally useful based on things like the number of targets affected or having a stronger effect with a longer cooldown, things like that. Rarely did I upgrade the same ability more than once for the same spec, but while I was putting together each spread of upgrades, what I didn't do, and what I probably should have done in retrospect, was to figure out what goals a player would have while they're looking at a list of upgrades, and then make sure upgrades exist in the spread that allow the player to pick upgrades that help them achieve those goals. In my next iteration, I plan to have that design goal in mind, to consider what the player wants to accomplish and how they could accomplish it with the upgrades. I strongly suspect that in this next iteration, there will be a lot more cases where I upgrade the same ability in 2 or more different ways. That will give players more options, and since that's going to be the goal with goal-oriented design, who knows? I might even have 3 different upgrades for the same ability in the end. However, I can do this much more effectively in an environment that has a great deal of feedback available, and that's where you come in. You have knowledge that comes from experience with these specs. I don't. I tried to do my research on Wowhead and Icy Veins for each spec, but inevitably there'll be things you know that I don't because you have experience that I don't have. You'll have more and better ideas than I could hope to have, and I know I need those, so please, let me know what you think of these upgrades and what better ideas you have for what to put in their places. Now, remember how I said warriors were the 3rd class I began cooking up upgrades for? Well, after I had created a kind of a first iteration spread for each of the specs, I decided to go through each spread again and add a section where I evaluate how I did based on whether a player could use the upgrades to buff their single target throughput and their multi-target throughput. And while Cross-Slash, Heroic Strike, and maybe Roundhouse situationally could be used to buff arm single target damage, seeing as how I have only 1 multi-target upgrade in the entire spread, I done goofed. I shouldn't be so surprised, I guess. I went into Project Decade knowing full well I was going to make some mistakes, and knowing I'd need player feedback to help me iterate and correct the mistakes and make a better iteration 2. I think iteration 2 is going to look way different from iteration 1. I already know that I want to upgrade Whirlwind, but what's the best way to do it? As a separate bleed effect that benefits from your mastery? I'd wanted to turn Execute into a ranged throw, but the PvP talent Death Sentence already boosts Execute's range and turns it into a charge. Would it be okay to have that PvP talent and the upgrade I'm thinking about interact to turn your Execute into an even longer range charge? Is that okay considering you already have a lot of mobility tools? Since I'm looking at these upgrades through the lens of how can I buff multi-target damage, I figure a minimum of 2 upgrades need to help with multi-target damage. Actually, I should make that 3 if I'm keeping Furious Leap around. That ability is a cooldown, and having 2 multi-target upgrades you can use rotationally is better than having just 1. I'm starting to lean in the direction of having 2 different upgrades for Slam. One that's single target and one that's multi-target. It wouldn't be the first time I've upgraded the same ability twice, and considering how limited my options are, it might be for the best. For a while, I was going to add a multi-target version of Mortal Strike, but then I realized that's basically the cleave talent. I'm starting to understand why Soul So Breezy and his version of this kind of idea wanted to get rid of talents altogether. Anyway, another thought is upgrading sweeping strikes to deal damage to more targets and to have more uptime, but to have a lower damage percentage. I'm not sure which abilities I'd be throwing out to make room for these other proposed upgrades either. I mean, I really like Roundhouse conceptually, both because it's using an underused animation and because it's taking a useless ability and giving it a purpose. If the purpose is a poorly thought out one, of course, I can change it. There's a lot of different things I can do with Roundhouse. Here's an interesting thought. Should I change Roundhouse from an upgrade to a new baseline ability that upgrades Shield Slam? I mean, I've noticed myself adding quality of life through the upgrade system and wondered whether I was doing it right, whether quality of life was better added via tweaks to the baseline kit instead. Heck, should I be thinking about adding abilities in general since ARMS has so few that I can upgrade? You know what? I'm going to go through the abilities listed on Icy Veins for ARMS rotation and figure out what my options are. Colossus Smash is replaced by Warbreaker, so that's not an option. Mortal Strike is already listed as an upgrade. Overpower is being changed so much by the Dreadnought talent, it's de facto already being replaced in the talent, so that's out. Looking at the Execute phase, Execute I've already discussed as a possibility. And looking at the multi-target rotations, I can add Sweeping Strikes, which I've already discussed, Blade Storm, which is out because of the Ravager talent, Whirlwind, which, again, I've already talked about. Like I said, when talents and Covenant abilities are taken out of the picture, ARMS has very few abilities in its rotation, and the design restrictions I have in place for how I'm putting together these upgrade spreads means there's not a lot I can do. But let's imagine an iteration 2 based on the things I've yacked about thus far, with 2 different upgrades to Slam, 1 single target and 1 multi-target, and an upgrade to Sweeping Strikes that gives it near 100% uptime. That's 2 new upgrades. I'll take out Ankle Slice and Gag Order for now, with the understanding that those are tentative. Now for upgrading single target, there's Cross Slash, Heroic Strike, and either Furious Leap or Roundhouse, assuming I don't make Roundhouse a new baseline ability. For multi-target, there's the multi-target Slam upgrade, the Sweeping Strikes upgrade, and Furious Leap, which isn't as bad as before. I could also swap out the multi-target Slam upgrade for the Bloodbath upgrade to Whirlwind, of course, and get about the same thing. But that's just some preliminary thoughts out loud from a clearly undereducated Holy Paladin player. To know what's really going on, I need some help. There's a lot that I don't know here. I do know that I done goofed with Iteration 1, and that I need help from experienced ARMS players to unfail and make Iteration 2 any good. I hope that at least you see enough potential in the upgrade system to be willing to help me salvage this and build it into something that actually excites players to see. You know, this is going to sound strange, but since I'm editing the Warrior upgrade spreads last of all, since I'm going in alphabetical order, I've gone through a lot of different upgrades, and I'm trying to puzzle out which one of all the upgrade spreads in all the classes and specs in Iteration 1 was the worst spread that I have done. When I got through Outlaw Rogues, I thought that was my worst. Then after Affliction Warlocks, I thought that one was my worst. Now I'm wondering if it was Arms Warriors the whole time. I mean, in each of those cases, my options for what to upgrade were pretty limited, which, combined with my lack of experience, probably had a lot to do with why they sucked. But what I'm confused about is, the logical part of my brain says, "Your Iteration 1 upgrade spread is bad, and you should feel bad." And I do feel bad about Outlaw and Affliction. And the emotional part of my brain says I should feel bad about Outlaw and Affliction too, but for some reason, that emotional part of my brain isn't saying I should feel bad about ARMS. Or Fury for that matter. Which doesn't make a lick of sense to me. The same causes and effects are at work in all 4 cases. So why the difference in how I feel about them? Maybe it's because at the time I started with ARMS, I hadn't yet gotten the idea into my head that I need to buff both single-target throughput and multi-target throughput with these upgrades, so I wasn't holding myself to the same standard. Even though you guys really should. I don't know. Maybe I'm compounding my mistakes by being too stream of consciousness-y in this video. I made the decision to err on the side of talking too much about what I'm thinking because I knew going into Project Decade that I'd inevitably end up making mistakes. And the more other players know about what I'm thinking and why, the easier a time they'll have getting me off the wrong track and onto the right track. So, what do you guys think of my ideas for Iteration 2? What better ideas do you guys have? And am I even thinking along the right tracks at all? What have I missed? I want to make Iteration 2 a lot better than Iteration 1. Of course, I know Blizzard probably won't take many or even any of these suggestions. Heck, they might even have something objectively better in store for us than the semi-borrowed power upgrade system that I've cooked up here. But knowing what gets players excited will be helpful to them even so. That is why I'm sacrificing so much of my free time and energy on Project Decade. And who knows, they might just need these ideas to get WoW going in the right direction. Heck, if this video series just gets the Blizzard developers into the habit of creating a blue post with the thinking in it that goes in depth enough for us to understand what they're doing and what their design goals are, then that would be a huge step forward. Even saying the thinking out loud is sometimes enough to get you a new perspective on what you're doing. Is it really what people want? Does it serve the purposes that it really should be serving in the end? Am I really doing something just to make a system look awesome instead of making the game overall better? What does it do for the fun factor? Am I making the mistake of prioritizing my design goals over the fun factor? Are my design goals the right design goals to have? Do my ideas match the spec's feel and flavor? Is it a net gain? Is it genuinely awesome? Things like that. Plus, we just plain need more communication from Blizzard. If Project Decade gets the development team into the habit of telling us the thinking for every change they make, then the whole project will have been worth it, even if they don't take a single suggestion. Again, if you see something you don't like bad trade-offs or something you know is counterproductive or useless, or if you've thought of an idea that's better or cooler or more useful than mine, then don't hesitate to let me know. The more details you can provide about why you don't like it and what makes one of my ideas counterproductive or useless, or about why your idea is cooler or more useful than mine, the better. One of the main goals of Project Decade is to give whoever's in charge of class design and player power systems a good idea what appeals to players and what will actually get them excited to get back to WoW again. And the more you can say about the wherefore and the why, the better. I fully intend to iterate on this project and make changes in response to feedback. I know I'm going to make mistakes. Heck, I've already seen mistakes in some of the things that I've done. But if those mistakes generate the kind of discussion that Blizzard needs to hear, so much the better. Blizzard needs to see player engagement, humility, and feedback actually making change in action so they can start doing what needs to be done to turn WoW around. It can be done and it should be done. World of Warcraft can last another decade. So keep the feedback coming, folks. There's one last thing. I began working on Project Decade videos back in July, and considering how many months it has taken, the fact that there are 36 different sets of feedback to curate and compile, and multitudes of decisions to make based on feedback received, ideas others have come up with, and how to weave everything together into a fun, functional, and exciting whole, I don't have a chance in the tramaculum of getting this done in any reasonable length of time unless I get volunteers to help me curate and compile the feedback I'm getting. If you're willing to help curate feedback, please let me know. If I get enough interest, I will set up a Discord server where we can coordinate everything. Thank you in advance for your feedback and support. Let's make World of Warcraft the best game that it can be.